Let's assume the bomb's roll.
However long it takes for somebody to get out there who's still alive. Look, you're going to slide.
Welcome to the Titan Missile Museum. My name is Steve. I'm going to be your briefer. Tell you a little bit about what's going to happen here today. This is a three-part tour. First part's going to be a 17-minute movie. It's going to tell you a little bit about the Titan program, tell you what the crew did, show you some things that you're not going to see on the tour. Just generally familiarize yourself, you with what you're going to see. Second part of the tour, they're going to take you outside and they're going to point out some highlights that are topside. Then we're going to go down below, which is the highlight of the tour. You're going to come down this access portal. You're going to come down to a blast lock area where you'll find some 6,000-pound doors that protected the crew from a near nuclear strike, as well as protected them from when the missile took off. You'll come through here into the Launch Control Center, which is part of this three-story structure. You're going to be in here for about 20 minutes, and you'll be told all about, again, what the crew does, the equipment they used, and then we'll take you through a simulated launch. This is an air shaft. The reason it's important is not only did it provide fresh air to the crew, but it was an alternate escape hatch, because if this collapsed in a near nuclear strike, this was the way out. Okay? By a near nuclear strike, I mean a mile or so away. Anything within a mile, if it hits us within a mile, we're gone. All this is gone. After you're finished and you come topside, you're going to be able to self-guide yourself through the artifacts on the top. The one thing I do not want you to miss is the glass pyramid, which allows you to see the missile from the top down. So your best view of the missile, so don't miss that. It's right behind the silo door. The silo door you can't miss because it's 760 tons and it's big and it's tan and you can't miss it. Okay, let's talk about some housekeeping rules. You can take all the photos you want, all right? Just please do not walk and take pictures at the same time because there are a lot of tripping hazards, all right? Nothing's classified, so you can take all you want. Second of all, if you have a cell phone, please put it on silent or airplane mode so you're not disturbing those around you. Only plastic water bottles, no food or no food or other beverages or chewing gum, just plastic water bottles. No tobacco products, no cigars, cigarettes, chewing tobacco, vaping machines, anything like that. Anybody here who's 6 feet tall or taller? You get to wear one of our wonderful Green Valley Green hard hats.
Okay.
Okay? It will protect your head when you're in the low-lying areas, which there are plenty of.
I bend well.
Okay. You're going to still have to bend. Okay, two really important things. Number one, this is a National Historic Site. It's owned by the United States Air Force. They ask that you do not touch anything unless a docent asks you to touch it. Everything here is irreplaceable. It's all one of a kind. Once it's gone, there will be no repair. They don't have them on eBay or Amazon or whatever. We can't replace any of the parts that get worn out or broken. So we ask that you don't touch anything. The only exception to the rule is the hand railings. When you're going down the steps, coming up the steps, hold on to the hand railing. It'll prevent, again, tripping hazards. The important thing when you're coming up, you're going to go down 55 steps, but I guarantee when you're coming back up, it's going to feel like 155, and holding onto that handrail will help you get back up, okay? Lastly, you're going to have two people on this tour. You're going to have a docent who's going to tell you everything you need to know, and you're going to have a safety officer. The purpose of the safety officer is to keep you comfortable and safe. If for any reason, while you're down below or anywhere during the tour, you feel claustrophobic, you feel sick to your stomach, you need a restroom, whatever it is, seek out the safety officer and he or she will make sure that you're properly taken care of. We want you to be comfortable and safe during this tour. Okay? Any questions? All right, we'll start our movie and I will be back in 17 minutes.
1963 until 1986. Hello and welcome to the Titan Missile Museum. This is Launch Complex 571-7. It was active for almost 20 years. When the Air Force decommissioned this complex in 1982, it invited the Arizona Aerospace Foundation to preserve the facilities for historical purposes. 571-7 was turned into a museum in part simply to preserve the missile and the complex as important artifacts of 20th century technology, but also in hopes that a knowledge of how it worked and why we needed it might give you a better understanding of the complexities of defending the United States and the awesome responsibilities of doing so with nuclear weapons. 571-7 also stands as a constant reminder that peace is never fully won. It is only kept from moment to moment. Titan II is the second generation of ICBMs used by the United States. The first ICBMs we used were the Atlas and the Titan I. Those were decent enough missiles, but they used liquid oxygen as the oxidizer in the propellants. Liquid oxygen is the best oxidizer you could ask for. The problem with liquid oxygen is that it's extremely cold and it boils away very quickly. That means you can't store it aboard the missile. You have to load it onto the missile right before you intend to launch. That can take a lot of time. And in a nuclear war, time is something you don't have very much of. Titan II solved that problem with the invention of storable propellants. Two very exotic liquid chemicals, a fuel and an oxidizer. Stable enough, you could load them on board the missile down in the silo and let it sit there for years on end, waiting to go at a moment's notice. Because Titan II always had a full load of propellants on board, the response time was not 30 or 45 minutes. The response time was 58 seconds. That was the huge advantage of Titan II. But that huge advantage came with two huge disadvantages. One is that those exotic liquid propellants were extraordinarily toxic and needed to be handled with what amounted to moon suits, known officially as rocket fuel handler clothing outfits, or REFCOs for short. The other disadvantage is that the oxidizer was really only stable if you kept it at 60 degrees Fahrenheit. If it got much warmer than 60, it would begin to boil inside the tanks of the missile. Trust me, this would be a bad thing. Now there's a third point about the propellants that's an advantage and a disadvantage all rolled up into one. That is, the propellants are hypergolic. What that means is that to launch the missile, all you have to do is mix those two liquids together, and they ignite spontaneously on contact with each other. The advantage is no complicated ignition system is required. The disadvantage is, suppose the missile springs a leak down in the silo and the chemicals mix accidentally. That would be a disaster. This is one of two platforms called hard stands that were used to actually load propellants onto the missile. This is the fuel hard stand. The oxidizer hard stand is on the other side of the complex. What they would do is bring a big tank truck in here full of fuel, hook up hoses, and offload the fuel onto this holding trailer. Then, they connect the holding trailer to the conditioning trailer. The job of the conditioning trailer is to heat or cool the propellant until it's at 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Once they have it at the right temperature, they flow it down through those big pipes into the first and second stage of the missile below. That's all there is to it. I think the most remarkable thing about the engines are the enormous numbers you can throw around when you talk about them. For example, the sign says the first stage generates 430,000 pounds of thrust. Now, I don't know about you, but pounds of thrust is not a unit of measure that makes much sense to me. So I like to think of the power of the engine in more familiar terms. Think of the power of the first stage as being about equal to two 747s running at full throttle. Now, the first stage burns for only 2.5 minutes. In other words, the entire working life of the first stage is 2.5 minutes, and then it's done forever. But in 2.5 minutes, the first stage consumes almost 25,000 gallons of propellants. That's 160 gallons a second. So the gas mileage is not very good. And it goes really fast to make up for it. Take a look around the back, where the top of the engine really, since this end was pointed up when it was attached to the missile, and you can see the intake lines for the fuel and the oxidizer on both segments of the engine. Originally, these lines were fitted with valves called pre-valves or butterfly valves. You can see how butterfly valves work in this cutaway. This butterfly valve is different than the others. It has a lock on it that prevents it from being opened until a secret code can be entered in a switch down in the control center. This engine has no off switch. Once it leaves the silo, there is no stopping it. It just goes and goes and goes, literally until it runs out of gas. So 2.5 minutes after launch, the propellants run out. The first stage is separated from the missile and goes flying back to Earth. At this point, the missile is something like 45 miles high and 45 miles north of here. So then the second stage kicks in and burns for about 3 minutes. It does have an off switch. The guidance system will shut it down at just the right instant. Then the second stage is separated. All that remains then is the RV with the bomb on board. Important point. Total flight time of the missile from launch to target destruction is something like 30 or 35 minutes, give or take. Of that time, only the first 5.5 minutes is powered flight. Everything else is ballistic flight. Ballistic just means that the RV is traveling the same kind of a path as a bullet fired from a gun. And just like a bullet, the RV is essentially coasting. So the RV coasts up to about 600 miles of altitude and does a ballistic free fall into the target. It's accurate enough that from 6,000 miles away, we can drop the bomb into a circle less than a mile in diameter. When the complex was operational, we didn't have any guards roaming around up here with M16s, waiting to shoot it out with the bad guys. All the security for the complex was handled by these curious scoop-shaped gizmos called Tipsies. The Tipsies are a kind of Doppler radar system, very similar to police radar, and these big scoops are actually antennas. Here's the setup. Say that this is the silo. The silo door fits on top, about like so. Slides off in this direction. And there's a pair of Tipsies at each corner of the silo door. What they do is send a radar beam between these Tipsies, like so. Together, they form an electronic fence around the silo. Anything that penetrates the beam will set off an alarm down in the control center. Now, the crew won't come up to see what the problem is. They just get on the phone with the wing command post. The wing command post will dispatch the security police, and they arrive in a little Jeep, just like this one, with M16s in hand, to have a look around. This is the primary alert system antenna. It was the main radio system on the complex. It kept the crew in touch with the wing command post and with the other launch sites around Tucson. It was the primary antenna on which the crew would get the message to launch. Because it was such an important system, and because the tower could easily be blown down in a nearby nuclear strike, this system had not one, but 2 identical backup antennas, both stored safely underground in their own hardened silos. Punch a button in the control center, a lid pops open, and the antenna is raised from underground. The crew could also receive the order to launch from the airborne command post through this antenna. This is a UHF semi-hardened antenna. UHF means ultra-high frequency. During the Cold War, the Air Force had an airplane flying 24 hours a day. It was called Looking Glass, and it acted as the airborne command post. If the ground-based command posts were destroyed, the order to launch could be sent from Looking Glass. Getting into the underground portion of the complex requires a simple but extremely secure procedure. Here's how it works. You and your crew pull up to the main gate. Get out, pick up the gate phone, and call the control center. This is the first of 4 phone calls you need to make. The control center wants your name, rank, crew number, and a few other details, but basically this phone call amounts to, "Hi, we're here." The control center will push a button on the console down there. It'll unlock the gate, roll the gate open, drive in, close the gate behind you, park right over here. While the rest of your crew begins an inspection of the topside, you go down to the bottom of these stairs and pick up a second phone. Hi, this is Chuck at the outer portal door. Thank you. This is Chuck, ready to code in. Okay, Sierra, Whiskey, Delta, Alpha, Bravo, November. Very good, thank you. Once you know a little about the history of the Cold War, it's not difficult to understand what went on here and why. The history of Titan II begins with nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons are the most powerful and destructive weapons ever devised. Nuclear weapons made it possible to wipe out entire cities with a single blow. The horrifying efficiency of nuclear weapons changed the basic thinking about how wars might be fought. Unlike the years-long conflicts of World Wars I and II, World War III might be over in less than 90 minutes. And more frightening still was the knowledge that there is no defense against nuclear weapons. Because the actual use of nuclear weapons would be so devastating, the U.S. nuclear missile program was designed not so much to fight a nuclear war, but to prevent one from ever starting. The concept is called peace through deterrence, and it depends on two important points. First, that the enemy understands that we'll use our missiles only to retaliate. And second, that the enemy understands that if they strike us and manage to destroy most or all of our country, that we can still retaliate with enough firepower to destroy most or all of their country. This threat of mutual annihilation, referred to by military planners as mutual assured destruction, or MAD, was the driving force behind peace through deterrence. The Cold War was essentially a political and economic struggle between the United States and the Soviet Union. Each believed the other was bent on world domination. With the invention of the atomic bomb in 1945 and the hydrogen bomb just a few years later, both sides began stockpiling nuclear weapons in what became an arms race, amassing ever more powerful bombs and the bombers to deliver them. Then, in 1957, the Soviets launched Sputnik. This 184-pound satellite stunned the world, not because it was the world's first artificial satellite, but because it meant the Soviets appeared to have the ability to deliver a nuclear bomb with a missile. Unlike bombers, which took hours to reach their targets, a bomb delivered with a missile could make the trip in little more than 30 minutes. Then, in October 1962, we discovered the Soviets had secretly installed nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles off the Florida coast. The Cuban Missile Crisis brought the world to the brink of an all-out nuclear war. Titan II was born of our nation's deepest fears. Not only that an attack on our country could bring about an end to our way of life, but could bring about an end to the world as we know it. Through much of the last half of the 20th century, the concept of peace through deterrence kept the Cold War from turning hot. This is Chuck at Blast Door 6. Okay, thanks. We're in. Titan II was the largest and most powerful intercontinental ballistic missile ever deployed by the United States. It stood 103 feet tall, 10 feet in diameter, and carried a single, very large hydrogen bomb. 54 Titan II missiles were installed at 3 locations in the U.S. There were 18 each in Little Rock, Arkansas, Wichita, Kansas, and here in Tucson, Arizona. The missile sites were buried deep underground, hardened against the effects of nuclear blast, heat, and radiation. Steel-reinforced concrete walls, some as thick as 8 feet, and massive 3-ton blast doors protected both missile and crew from the ravages of a nuclear explosion. It's a complex operation, watching over a Titan II missile. Still, on a day-to-day basis, it only took 4 people to keep the place running. Of course, if something serious went wrong, there were hundreds of highly trained specialists back at the base who could be here in as little as 30 minutes. The crew consisted of 4 people, 2 officers and 2 enlisted. They pulled a 24-hour shift called an alert. The crew had a fairly busy schedule, reports to write, logs to keep, messages to answer. And each time a new crew came on board, they had to do a complete inspection of the entire complex from top to bottom. They looked at everything. Pumps, fans, motors, gaskets, switches, gauges, you name it, every detail. And then 12 hours later, they did it all over again. Now, the crew is going to be here for a full 24 hours, so they need a place to relax, to eat, to sleep, maybe take a shower. They can do that right upstairs in the crew's quarters. Nothing fancy up here, spare bunk beds. And your basic kitchen. Up here in the crew's quarters was the only place you could ever be alone. Everywhere else in the complex, someone had to be with you all the time. You see the signs everywhere. No lone zone, SAC two-man policy mandatory. There are two reasons for that policy, safety and security. Safety because there are a lot of ways to hurt yourself down here, and if you do get hurt, you want to make sure help is close at hand. Security because we had a nuclear weapon down here, and we wanted to make sure that everybody was on the up and up. So I watch you, and you watch me. Two-man policy. But up here in the crew's quarters, you could be alone. And this is where the crews would come to relax a little bit. They could read a magazine or a book. They could play a game of cards. They could even get something to eat. And people who could cook were highly prized as crew members. So between eating and sleeping and inspections and generally watching over the missile, the crew waited for messages from the wing command post. They were waiting for the message to launch their missile. They waited for more than 20 years, but the message never came. That's because of peace through deterrence, as provided by weapon systems like Titan II, and the pride and dedication of the Air Force men and women who worked in the Titan program. And to all of them, we just like to say, well done. Enjoy your tour.
Okay, folks, remember, if you're 6 feet tall or over, you need a green helmet. Otherwise, let's go on tour.
I was falling asleep.
Down the ramp.
Come on down, out here. Come on down, we're gonna enjoy this nice warm Arizona sunshine today.
Oh,
It's a
great.
perfect day
Yeah,
here.
it is great. Yeah.
Yeah. We're done with our 110-degree weather, I think.
All right. Welcome to the Titan II Missile Museum. I am Mike, one of your guides. We have John and Amber that are going to be doing this tour today with you. Hopefully you're here to have some fun, or at least learn a little bit more information about the Titan II missile. I usually start off with a little bit about the security, because you heard about that in the video. And you can see that we have this 3-acre area is covered by a fence, and that is your first line of keeping people on the other side. Another thing that you have also seen in the movie is the tipsy devices. Those scoop-looking devices are a radar beam that goes between them. If it gets broken, like somebody walks through it, an animal goes through it, or if you throw a plant through it, it's going to send off an alarm downstairs. That is actually where the air shaft was. At this time, we have an AC unit right there where the yellow band is. That was not there, it was just a grate. And so they wanted to make sure that the fresh air going down into the facility down below was protected. So that was where one set of tipsies was. The second set of tipsies was over by the silo doors. They wanted to have that redundancy in the security. A little bit about the communications. The one thing that we have right here, you can see we have 4 different antenna arrays around the whole facility. But the one right there is actually was buried underground about 10, 12 feet below. And that's what we call affectionately the egg beater. It was a low frequency communication device, and we could not send stuff out. We only received alphanumeric information on the control panel down below. With that, kind of moving over this way, I talked about a couple pieces of weather equipment. Right behind us, we have the red Baron, kind of looks like a plane. That would give you your wind direction and wind speed, and that would be helpful mostly if you had like an accident like in 1980 where you had a chemical spill and you wanted to figure out where downwind was. It would be used in that way. And if you had, or if you're working with the fuel or oxidizer, that would be another reason why you would want to be aware of what the wind speed was. right behind me, we have the Delta T pole. That Delta T pole is about 50 feet, had a temperature sensor on the top and about 6 feet down at the bottom. If the temperature was higher above than it was below, you had an inversion. That means it would trap the air down and it would be pretty stable. And if you're working with the fuel or oxidizer, that could be like a dangerous situation. So they want to make sure that they would not be in that situation. 50-foot pole. If you stack 2 of those on top of one another, that's about the height of the Titan II in the missile silo. If you stack 3 on top of one another, that'd be about the depth of the silo itself. Silo doors, 760 tons of solid steel and concrete. What's most impressive to me is they could actually be moved in under 20 seconds if a launch order ever came. So that's pretty impressive. And follow out where the main gate is right there. As you saw in the movie, they would pick up the telephone right outside that gate. They had 3 minutes after concluding their conversation down below to get from there to the next telephone, or security forces would be called out. And you would think that'd be enough security between the tipsy devices and the gate and having all this locking. But they also had a duress word. If somebody tried to force their way in, what they would do is they would use a common word like pizza or popcorn, work that into the conversation as a duress word to let them know that there was a breach in security. So they had a redundancy in actual communications. They actually had 7 different ways to receive communications if they ever had a launch order. And I've worked in my past life with special operators, and they had a saying, 2 is 1 and 1 is none. You want to make sure you have redundancy and a backup for your backup. And so they have that in communications. They also have that in their security. And also be mindful, this is a National Historic Landmark. Please, when you go down the stairs, watch what you're touching. Unless you're authorized directly to touch something, please do not. And well, think safety as we're walking down the stairs. Make sure you're using the handrails and watching your step. All right, so let's go ahead and go down. That is a mine over on the other side, but we will talk about more questions when we get down or come back up topside. But no, that's not part of here. That's actually a mine.
Got it. Alright guys, make sure that you're holding onto the handrails as you go down into the site here.
It's no military sites. We got tripping hazards everywhere, so step up right there.
Thank you.
Hang on the handrails going down. Step down, step up.
You're gonna notice some wonderful smells. This is the
Yeah, I can smell that.
You gotta go down the ship, that's what it smells like.
Step up. Step up.
Make way for everyone else. Alright, so we are now 35 feet underground. Basically what you just came down is pretty awesome construction, right? Yes, it is, but it is still considered soft, meaning that it would be destroyed in a nearby nuclear detonation. Everything behind these walls is considered hardened, meaning that it would likely survive a nuclear detonation. This is where they would make their phone call. They basically pick up the phone and say, hey, we're here, let us in. A button right here is pressed, and there's a similar one, identical to this one inside the LCC. They both are pressed at the same time, which would move these 4 hydraulic pins to allow this door to be opened. This is blast door 6, that's blast door 7 over there. 8 and 9 are on the other side. 6 and 7 protect the crew from anything outside. 8 and 9 protect anything going on inside the side. Inside the door, it is I-beams welded together, stacked on top of each other, and it is air sealed with steel plating here when it's fully closed. If the site was in use right now, the doors would be closed. Only one door can be opened at a time. They are electronically paired. These walls here, 4 feet thick, filled with concrete and reinforced with rebar, which is most of them about the size of the handrails you see there. So pretty thick rebar inside here holding them together. All of this is to protect from a nearby nuclear detonation, making sure that we are able to, if the first mission failed, which is peace through deterrence, if that mission failed, we were under nuclear attack, right? So, second mission would be to launch that missile inside. So everything inside here needs to be protected in order to fulfill that mission. This concrete is encased in steel, protects from EMPs, electromagnetic pulse, that we get through the shockwave or after effects of a nearby nuclear detonation, which would be within a mile away. The doors, anybody remember how heavy they were? Can I borrow you? Okay, please. Grab this handle right here. And lean back. Push all the way back. It's on screen. There you go. So you just moved 6,000 pounds. How do you feel?
Let's see your muscles.
Right? All right, we can move on in here, guys. And as we move on in here, you guys are going to notice some shoddy electrical work right here. Done on purpose. This is another effect. So another effect of a nearby nuclear detonation would be shockwave, right? The slack in here allowed the equipment that was mission critical to bounce and sway to allow it to still function. All right?
Is it built on a lot of spring base, is it?
Yeah, we'll answer more of that. You'll see a lot more shock isolation. Springs on the lights and emergency lights as well up here. All right, so now we're going to move into the Launch Control Center where John's going to take over and give you some more fun stuff.
Come on in here, folks. Come on in here. We're going to have to crowd around in here. We got a lot of standing room. We've got a bench here. We can have 3 people sit down there. Just don't lean back. We don't want to knock anything over. Come on in, folks. Come on in. All of you, come on in. Now, I would like a woman to volunteer. All right. I would like for you to sit right here. We have just picked our commander. Fantastic. I'm going to make you a captain today. I was a captain in the Air Force during this period. Oh, excuse me. I wasn't in this program, though. So, what's your first name, Captain?
Joy.
Captain Joy. I have a question for all of you. If you came down here where this is on, right, you think you'd find a woman sitting in this chair here? Good. Probably not. Probably not. Well, however, you're only partial. In 1979, this wasn't all, guys. 78, Congress passed a law allowing women to start fulfilling combat positions. This was the very first DoD program to allow that. Yvonne Morris, our museum director, she's here right today, sat right here, in this very chair right here in 1982, as one of the last commanders of this site. If you go to our Minuteman sites we still have left today, you'll find a good portion of our combat crew members up there are women. That's been a good thing. It's been a lot of extra talent in the military. So if you have daughters or granddaughters, invite them to join the Air Force. Grandsons and sons too. It's a good way to return service to your country. Okay, Captain Joy, I have a question for you. Out there, Amber talked about shock isolation, didn't we? The importance of shock isolation. This is your launch console. This is the most important thing here. But I don't see it sitting on springs. I don't see these lights sitting on springs. Where is your shock isolation, please? Oh, yeah.
Over here.
And over here. And over here. Folks, see these big springs? We're in a 3-story building. Our entire 3-story building is shock isolated. When you came in here, you crossed the bridge. We're that far from that 4-foot thick wall. That shockwave would move that 4-foot thick wall back and forth. Captain Joy here wouldn't even spill her coffee or coke sitting right here on the council, or knock her cigarette out of the building in 1960s ice tray. That's one good thing that's changed, right? So, the captain on the bottom row of indicator lights right now could, monitor all the important components throughout the facility. The bottom row. Middle row, they can monitor the important components on the RV. What's the RV? Is that our Winnebago? No, there's nothing recreational about this here. That's our reentry vehicle, our missile, our guidance system, our power, targeting information, launch sequence information, communication information. Shoot, I love tours that have kids on. Because if they're under 15, I pick this thing up and I ask them what this is. And if they're under 15, they have absolutely no idea what this is. If they're under 25, they've never used one. Scouts honor. In December, I had a young man look at that on a tour. He said, I think it's a pencil sharpener. And the very next tour, a young man looked at it and said, I think it is a clock. Now,
You've probably never used one of these, have you?
I have.
You have, okay, no, you're older than I thought. You know why we've eliminated these, why we don't use them anymore? Try texting on it. Deputy commander sat here. Deputy commander was responsible primarily for three things. Communication. All these radios attached to all those antennas that Mike was talking about topside. In the event that the soft antennas were lost, could deploy the hardened antennas out of their own underground bunkers from right here. Now the deputy was also the safety and security person on site. And one of the things that he or she had to do was to keep track of everyone on site. Now that wasn't difficult with a four-person crew. Quite often they had a lot of extra people here from maintenance, doing corrective and preventive maintenance all over the place. You'd have to know where they were at, be able to show them quickly in the event of emergency. You keep track of them on your locator board right here. With this 1960s grease pencil, you remember the ones with the strings on, pull the strings to keep things sharp, right? Magic markers have taken over the world today, haven't they? Well, the deputy is also responsible for this clock. That's our launch clock. Look at the time. It says it's 1929 now. 1929. Is that our? Who said it?
Greenwich.
Absolutely. Must have a vet here. All military operations operate on Greenwich Mean Time. That's for the zero minute test. We call it Zulu time. I like to mix up time zones and daylight savings time to keep things simple for us. Guess what? If the deputy is on duty Sunday morning, he or she has to wind this up. I say wind up. Why didn't we have electricity down here? Why do we have no old-fashioned wind-up clock? Any ideas? Well, we kind of tend to forget back in the 1960s, we had electric clocks everywhere, but they only operate with those AC cycles in your current, and they could be erratic. This was much more accurate because the deputy would hack this clock at least twice a day with the atomic clock up in Boulder, Colorado. It was never more than 1 second off in accuracy. That was the best way to keep track of time right there. Now, folks, these were 2 officers. On crew, we also had 2 enlisted. The enlisted folks were more highly trained than the officers. They each had to go to school for almost 1 year to learn about their jobs here. One was called the Missile Facilities Technician. Been like our building supervisor. Had to know everything about the entire complex. Second person was called the Ballistic Missile Analyst Technician. Same thing, dealing with the missile. And the guidance system of the missile. Folks, he would have been our 1960s computer guru, because our missile had a computer on it back then. It was 4K. That's 4,000 bits of memory. We thought we were pretty important back then. Now, the MFT could look right here, monitor the power coming in, bought it from the local utility company, just like we are today. However, the event of a war, that power's not going to be there, is it? Let us solve that. If you go down to the 3rd level of the silo, you'll find a gigantic 510 horsepower diesel engine, the size of this room. You kick on, give you all the power you needed. You got one problem with that, Captain. Those old diesel engines took about 60 seconds to come full bore. And that computer sitting on top of that missile, plus gyro compasses on top of that missile, spinning at high rate of speed, always had to be powered up. What has followed that? Right down below us in the equipment bay, the engineers put in 228 volt DC batteries. Each battery is the size of this console and this high. These batteries immediately snap on, you got the power. These batteries are so powerful they would last for hours. These batteries are so powerful if you had to, you could launch this missile under battery power, including opening up that 760-ton blast door. Now figure that out for 1960s technology. It's amazing. Yeah. Now the BMAP would be able to, test, troubleshoot, and monitor all the important components on the missile itself. This panel right here. The BMAP would be able to monitor the launch sequence across these 2 panels here, deal with targeting information. Now if they ever heard something's broken your tipsy beam, topside, you have an intruder. Now you're armed with a 38, your deputy's got a 38. You guys get up there and take care of that, don't you? You just get on your call. You just call that wing command post. They dispatch that strike team with M16s and find that 4-legged critter, or that tumbleweed that just broke your tipsy beam, because that's all it ever was. And right here, that's the butterfly valve lock. Your video talked about the butterfly valves in the first stage of the missile. There are 4 of them, 2 for fuel, 2 for oxidation. Folks, here's a half cutaway of one of these valves. These valves would open, your fuel and oxidizer would flow. It would meet the 2 combustion chambers with a hypergonic reaction, which meant it ignited itself. So a little demo, little drop, a little flame came up. Wasn't quite like that. It meant the combustion chamber with a gigantic explosion. After about 10 years, the Air Force wanted a little more security in this program, so they took one of the oxidizer valves. They put a device in here to prevent this valve from opening and prevent the missile from firing, unless you put the right code there. Now, please note, there's 6 wheels there. Each wheel has 16 alpha characters on it. How many possible codes could you have? 6 to the 16th power. or 16 to the 6th power. You calculate it either way. It comes out to about 17.8 million. Guess what? You didn't have the code. Debbie didn't have the code. It wasn't in the safe right there. No. We'll come back to that later. Now, I spent 4 years in the Air Force. I dealt with top secret information. In terms of top secret information, is this good enough for the Air Force? No, you are exactly right. This is the only device that's directly wired with the command post. If someone were to get down there and just touch one of those fields, they would get an alarm. Investigation would start, and that's pretty darn good security, right? Is it good enough for the Air Force? Let me suggest it's not. Does everyone have an ATM card? Do you remember that brain freeze? Forget your PIN number. How many tries you get? Someone's been there? Oh, 3. Oh, someone's been there. All right. Well, folks, you got 6 tries. But you don't know how many tries in front of you. On that 7 try that valve on this actually destroys itself. And someone has to come out and completely repair it or replace it. And folks, that's good security. And my hat goes off to the planners of this program for building that level of security to prevent an unauthorized launch. Now these 2 panels, they get that voltage down to missile. This big panel right there, that's called the missile guidance and checkout group. Since that's such a mouthful, they just call it the McGat. Now when the McGat was installed in the early 1960s, all those blank panels were full of state-of-the-art electronics. The Air Force designed this program to last just 10 years. If you go back in history, in the mid-70s, you'll find the Cold War was going on. The government wanted to keep this program going. Air Force had a problem. Electronics really advanced itself, and they ran out of replacement parts. So what they did is they went back to the manufacturer, GM, who they knew was working with MIT of the day, it's Chris Bowen, designed the new Universal Space Guidance System for Boeing's brand new 747 jetliner. So the Air Force just piggybacked off this research. All these panels go blank. Get this, consolidated electronics. And now, Commander, our computer's sitting on top of that missile. We're at 16K right now. We're getting into the real world, right? Still before so. Okay, Commander, where is our missile targeted to? Which target slid up here? That's correct. I want you to tell everyone in the room everything you know about target 2, please. Please?
It's up over here.
Well, that's true. You could say it's between 1 and 3. You could say that. That's true too, right? She's right. Crew members down here had absolutely no knowledge where this one missile, this one warhead was going. They had no need to know. The only thing they can tell about target 2 is they could look right there and see target 2 is set for ground burst. Targets 1 and 3 are set for air burst. So wherever target 2 is, it must be some type of hardened facility like right now. Maybe a command and control post, an industrial yard, hydrogen, something the government totally wanted to destroy. Now you can switch between 1 and 3 by just pressing those buttons. Not only a SAC told you to. Or a SAC ever wanted to move away from those 3 targets, they just send a special courier down with the top secret reader tape in there. Again, read it right here, get a printout, you get 3 new targets. Folks, this was a tape. It was paper with holes in it. In the mid-70s, I had a heat track. I thought that was pretty cool. Why are we using this old-fashioned technology in the electronic age? Help me out.
Yeah.
She's got it. She's sharp. It cannot be hacked. It cannot be electronically changed, right? Magnet's not going to bother it either. Exactly. It's not going to catch a virus. A very safe and secure way to handle classified information. Okay, folks, we stand down here in the deterrence. The deterrence fails, we will get a launch order. Launch order comes from SAC headquarters up in Omaha. Simultaneously from 15th Air Force headquarters in Bakersfield, California. That's who we're responsible to. They come across those VHF frequencies first, the white antennas topside, fed into these 2 speakers here and here, and then shortly after that across all the other radio spectrum as well. And it would sound like this. Crews were getting messages across these radio spectrums all the time. They had heard a message with a preamble Alpha 2. That was a for sure real launcher. Things got real serious real quick down here. Our commander and deputy commander take their emergency action message booklets. They both open it up to the appropriate page, and they both start writing down the next 35 characters that came across that message. The message would be repeated, they'd exchange booklets and check each other's work. If they both agree those 35 characters are correct, you launch the missile, right? You launch the missile, right?
Yes.
No.
No.
Who's the only person authorized to release a nuclear warhead in this country?
Right.
Absolutely. You got to make sure this is really coming from the President of the United States, right? You make sure someone hacked this radio frequency and sent you a false launch order. The only thing this gives you permission to do is to go over your water safe and take your padlocks off. Now, the padlock on the left is yours, the one on the right is your deputy's. You were issued those padlocks when you finished all your training for the program. You had to keep those padlocks in your possession 24/7. You had to put your own combination of those padlocks. The Air Force classified that combination top secret. You guys open up that safe. You take out your launch keys, and you take out a stack of authenticator cards. There are a lot in there. There's 4 of them. You go to the second line of your message, look at the first 2 characters, and find the matching authenticator card. Let's say it was Lima 5. Take that authenticator card envelope, break the seal in the envelope, open it up, pull out the authenticator card on the inside, make sure it says Lima 5, and then look at the next 5 characters. If you all agree those 7 characters are correct, we know 2 things. Number 1, the President's authorized this, and you're going to launch the missile. And number 2 is, since we stand down here in deterrence has failed, and you have a hydrogen bomb coming toward you right now. What do you think your heart rate is? Pretty high, right? Things are really serious at this point. The 2 of you are not done with your message yet. You both go to the last line of your message and you calculate out what your launch time is. After you both agree on the launch time, the deputy marks the launch time on the launch clock. Now, the launch of the attack back might not be right now, it could be minutes from now, hours from now, days from now. Probably in this program, since this was a big war, it was probably pretty early. The attack back is based upon the Joint Pentagon plan called the PSYOP plan. We don't want our missile flying through the hydrogen bomb blast from another missile, right? We don't want B-52 bombers flying through the hydrogen bomb blast from our missile. So everything is sequenced, everything is timed, everything is choreographed as best it can be. And then, Commander, you go to the top line of your message and you get the last bit of information you need to launch that missile. And it's 6 characters. And what is it? We just talked about it. Out of millions. The butterfly code. That's the first and only time this butterfly code comes into this facility without an unauthorized launch is with an actual launcher. You read the butterfly code off the VMAT 1000 in here, let's go. You take your launch key, you break the seal on your lock, you put your launch key in right over here, the deputy does the same thing over here. Now folks, these keys are 7.5 feet apart. It takes 2 people turning these keys at the same time. You have to turn them, they're spring-loaded locks in the off position. You have to turn them, quarter turn to the right, and hold them there for about 5 seconds in order to enable this launch. Are you ready to finish World War III? You have no choice. The President's told you to take your left hand and put it on the key. I will give you a countdown, and when I say turn, you
You
turn.
said I can touch it, right?
You turn the key.
You said I can touch it.
No, you turn the key a quarter. Use your left hand. Use your left hand.
My left.
Yeah, because I want you to turn a quarter turn to the right and hold it there until that green light just on the other side the key comes on. I can't see. You tell me when the green light
Do
comes
you
on.
really want me to?
Yes, I really. You have to. You've been ordered to. Boy, is she this bad? 3, 2, 1, turn. Turn all the way, all the way, all the way. Hold it there. Tell me when the green light comes on. Is it on? It's on. You can release.
Battery activated.
Now you got a good key turn. You can release. Your job's done. You got a good butterfly valve. On top of this are 2 28-volt batteries that have been inert. These batteries are being charged up for the very first time. It takes 28 seconds for these 2 batteries to charge up. Once these batteries are charged up, this missile does not need us anymore. Its power, its computer take over. We become bystanders. Once it's charged up, we'll have this APS power apps light come on. When that light comes on, we now have that 760-ton blast starting time to cover our missile. It takes 19 seconds to let it go. It just goes like Trixie beam, so we know it's open. The computer on top of the missile is doing a last-minute guidance check with McGee down there. If the guidances go, the engines will fire. When the engines fire, all the fire alarms and the silo will all simultaneously. When the engines are at 77% thrust, the 4 gigantic hold-down bolts will explode on both sides. And 4 seconds later, we have right here.
Lift off.
Now, folks, that was 58 seconds between the time that key was turned to that missile's out of this silo. Tens of minutes faster than that first generation of ICBM. Okay, Captain Jim, where is your whoops button?
My what button?
Your whoops button. You don't have one, you're right. If the president called you right now and said, I made a mistake, I don't want to launch that missile, you could tell him where to go. Turning that key is just like pulling the trigger on the rifle. That bullet's going to leave the chamber, nothing's going to stop it. This missile's going to leave the cell, nothing's going to stop it. 30, 35 minutes from now, 6,000 plus miles likely over the North Pole, this missile will impact ground right on top of target 2. The 9 megaton hydrogen bomb will explode. That bomb will dig a crater 400 to 600 feet deep, 3/4 of a mile or so in diameter, vaporize everything in it, destroy hundreds of square miles around it because of all the dirt that's kicked up, contaminate 5,000 square miles around it with radiation. Folks, if it was set for an airburst, as 1 and 3 are, it would explode at 14,000 feet. In a split second, it would destroy an area of almost 1,000 square miles. That's Los Angeles County, and most of Orange County gone in a split second. This was the biggest bomb the Americans ever put on top of a missile. How big? This one bomb was 600 times more powerful than the bomb we dropped in Hiroshima to end World War II. How big? This one bomb had 3 times the explosive power. Of all the munitions we fired off in World War II, in both theaters, including the 2 atomic bombs, and including our allies, and Russia was our ally, 3 times the explosive power. Measured in tons of TNT. How do you get your head around what 9 million tons of TNT are? Let's see. You load that amount of TNT onto a railroad boxcar, from the floor to the ceiling. You'll find your engine right here in Tucson, and your boost is going to be way up in Canada. It'll be a 1,500-mile long train to hold 9 million tons of TNT. But fortunately, the key never had to be turned. It did not have to be turned because of deterrence. Peace to deterrence. But for deterrence to work, you really had to instill in the mind of enemy the ultimate fear. They were to attack us or our allies. They were going to be destroyed too. These 54 large missiles we had in the south, plus the 1,000 Minuteman missiles we had in the day up north, plus all the B-52, B-58 bombers we had on alert 24/7 all over the country, plus all the Navy Polaris submarines we had into the ocean today, all the Army Jupiter rockets we had in Europe today. There were the means to do that. And the will to do that was the highly selected, highly trained crew members, like Yvonne Morris, sitting in chairs like this all over the country, willing to follow the President's orders, his sole told. Okay, Captain, your job's not quite done. Well, first of all, you want to get your fires out in the silo down there. You can do that from right here. Then you're going to want to get that big silo blast door closed because you don't want extra radiation coming down here. You can do that from right over here. And then guess what? Now, your next orders are to wait for further orders. Now, if you felt these walls shake, do you think you're going to get further orders? You might be right. So you have a decision to make, not only for yourself, but your other 3 crew members, in about 20 to 30 days. You see, when that missile left, when these walls start shaking, well, that fresh air came in, we're talking about topside, Xing right over there. There's a great big blast valve in there, snap shut. You are now sealed in a 3-story building. You only have enough air and oxygen here to last about 20 to 30 days. So before your oxygen completely runs out, you're going to have to decide, are you guys going to stay down here forever? Or are you going to go downstairs in the equipment bay, open up the emergency escape hatch, maybe a submarine type of crawl up the long escape ladder into nuclear wasteland or not? Or you might get to the top of that ladder and find it covered with so much debris you can't get out anyhow. So you're expendable. The decisions that never had to be made because of deterrence. Peace to deterrence. It worked then, and it's working today. So Captain Joy, we have momentum for you.
Thank you.
It says what?
I turned a key.
You did turn a key. Now, you also opened that blaster, didn't you? This is much more important. I keep that with you because it says you moved. It certifies that you've moved 6,000 pounds. If anyone gives you a hard time, you just pull that out and show them, and they'll back away.
I got 2.
Peace through deterrence, folks. It worked back then. It's still working today, right? In fact, deterrence worked before nuclear weapons. But it's a very costly and very scary investment to make. Okay, we're going to go down and take a look at the missile. Mike's going to lead that tour down, but let me suggest something to you right now. What you just witnessed right now as a demonstration might not be a whole lot different than the crew would have actually experienced launching this missile under attack. The early days, there was no carpet on the floor. A lot of noise coming up from our equipment bay down below. But the crew members launching this missile under attack would not have heard, would not have felt that missile leaving the silo 250 feet away. It is so well shock isolated. What you just experienced is what they would have likely experienced launching this missile. Okay, follow Mike down in the silo. We got to see if the missile's still in here. Now, the neat thing about the military, commanders are responsible for everything. So if the missile isn't here, our captain's going to pay for it. We'll take questions, Topside. Okay, because we got a tour right back of us. Yeah. And we're going to give a tour in $1960, only $2.5 million. And Amber takes Visa. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Great.
So you can go ahead and feel free to take pictures of the Titan II missile in its native habitat called the silo. And I'll talk a little bit about that while you're taking those pictures. The missile itself, this one was actually an operational missile, but it was used as a training missile only. So this would be located at Shepherd Air Force Base in Texas, and any of the crews that they talked about going through would be training on this particular missile. Interesting enough, the way it's sitting right now, it's empty. It never had propellants or any kind of warhead on it at any time. So it would, in this case, it would be about 15,000 pounds in weight, unloaded. If it was fully loaded, it would be 330,000 pounds. So that propellant was an incredible weight on top of this, or in this missile. And also, if you look at it, it's just basically aircraft aluminum that it's made out of. And it's actually about as thin as a common coin that you would have in your pocket. So keep that in mind when we start talking about the noise and how the vibration potential. So let's go ahead and look at two pictures here that I want to show you, talk a little bit more. This first picture would be if you're looking topside, which I highly recommend when you go up topside. When you're looking down on the glass, just make sure that it's not hot, but you'll get a very similar view. Looking down, you get a really good view. And what I want to point out here is the thrust mount. It's a circular, and the actual missile is bolted to that thrust mount. Also notice it has large springs, so even the missile itself was shock isolated. And so that would be another feature. Now what happens, and at 77% of thrust power, those bolts actually would explode and would allow it to lift out of the silo in about 4 to 5 seconds. Now here's the issue. What happens when you have that hypergolic explosion? You have a very large explosion in a very confined space. What's that going to do? A lot of sound, vibration. Remember how thin this was, and you have sensitive components in the missile itself. So they came up with two different ways to try to offset that or attenuate or suppress that energy. The first one, or the primary one, they had 4 valves, gravity fed down, and would pour out 9,000 gallons per minute. And so what happens when you have fire and water come together? Create steam. Steam that took a lot of that energy out. So that was one of the primary sources to mitigate that sound energy. Secondly, if you notice in the picture or in the silo, you see that there's these fiberglass panels that are about 1 foot thick. Think of it this way, it was kind of the world's largest glass pack muffler that we've ever created. So that was the second way of doing that sound suppression. I also want to touch on the accuracy of this missile. And we had 49 missiles that were built, and then they rotated them out. And so they took the operational missiles out, and they took those ones that were in the silo and tested them at Vandenberg Air Force Base. They took off from there, went 6,000 miles over the Pacific to the Marshall Islands, and they would be able to land in a lagoon that was about 1 mile across. Pretty accurate. Now, and this is something else we want to talk about, why was it so accurate? It had 2 pieces to it. You had the inertial measurement unit, or IMU. In both of these devices, the guidance system, you can go into the education center on topside in the room, and you can actually look at the parts in it. That first part, the IMU, it did north, south, east, and west, and also vertical. And so it always kept track of that in the silo, as well as where it was moving at all times. So that was the first piece of it. And if you think about that, that was pretty big. You have to know where you're starting before you can get to where you're going to. The guidance piece is pretty interesting. As you think about this, what happens, you're launching a large missile up, usually over the North Pole, so it's going into outer space and then coming back down. So what's happening? Well, underneath it, it's spinning. The Earth spins. And guess what? Due to physics, the Earth spins quicker at the poles than it does at the equator. It's called conservation of angular momentum. Fancy word for it spins faster at the poles. And so that's one piece I had to calculate. Remember, gravity, friction, Coriolis force as it turns to the right in the northern hemisphere. All these things, they use trig-based calculus to calculate in those 16K devices in a computer. That's 1960s technology. And 87% of the time, those 49 missiles would actually land within 1 mile. That was the one thing that we had over the Russians. Russians had larger bombs. They had 20 to 24 megatons. We had 9. However, ours was more accurate, and they were able to witness that and see that. And that was a big part of deterrence. So not only did it did smashingly well, no pun intended, because it didn't actually we never had to launch it ever at any given time. So deterrence, it did really well at. The other thing it did really well at is the space mission. First manned space mission launch in the Gemini program, as well as you may have heard of him, Neil Armstrong went up on a Titan II missile. And also after they decommissioned it, and they also were able to send up weather satellites and communication satellites. So it has very long history. We got a lot of money and value in tax dollar out of this lifespan of this whole missile. So we'll go ahead and head up, and we can ask questions topside and answer questions up there.
Thank you. Here, we're going to, that one?
Yeah.
Okay. Follow Mike up top. We'll take your questions up there. I'll bring up the rear. Go ahead, Mike. You and Amber both go up and lead the question answer period. We'll take all your questions topside.
We got a 10 out of 1, so you'll be taking.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. You got to
So you lead.
I'm stuck with your questions.
Oh, yeah.
Wow, you're in trouble. All right. All right. Follow them up. There, please.
It hasn't happened yet. Yes. And I don't know how that happened.
For the first time, we're playing catch up now from Russia and China, where it hasn't.
So we're developing new replacement ICBMs.
This is right. Yeah.
They're going to start testing.
You guys survived the stairs. Good job.
Yeah, it's fine.
Was it though? Was it fun?
All right.
Fun.
The stairs?
Well, listen,
Oh.
first of all, Dave, thank Amber and thank Mike. They're in training right now. I think they did a pretty good job. Okay. Go do lunch. And I'm going to be stuck with your questions. I know you got them.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
2 or 3 different communications channels that could be used here.
4.
4. How many did they use in the nuclear?
You know, I really don't know.
But I mean,
No, but they, you know, they had that ultra low frequency capability on nuclear submarines. They can get those launch orders while underwater.
yeah.
And I do know that it works the same as this one right over here. Except it might even been a little lower frequency.
I just wondered if those were jammable or.
I don't think you can jam these low frequencies. You know, at the low end, if you're familiar with radio waves, you know, radio waves, you know, are like that. Or ultra low frequency radio wave, for example, is 13.5 miles long. That's how long that radio wave is. It's way, way below the old AM band. The AM bands was 560 kilohertz. This was 14 kilohertz. Yeah. Good questions.
They said that they launched from Vandenberg into the Marshall Islands. Was that the quadrant?
Quadranites, right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. We'd invite the Russians to get down there and watch this. We wanted them to see these things land down there. That's part of our deterrence.
When they land, what happened to it?
We didn't have a warhead on, just made a big splash.
But it's gone though, you can't use them again.
Yeah, right. Can't use them again. Well, actually, the only thing that came down was a re-entry vehicle. You know, this is a 2-stage missile.
Right.
You know, your first stage drops off after 2.5 minutes.
Right.
And it falls back to Earth. After the first stage only burned 2.5 minutes. At that time, the missile is about 50 miles to the north, assuming they're going to the North Pole and beyond, and about 50 miles up. Then the second stage takes over, and it only burns for about 3 minutes, depending on where the target is. Could be a little more than that. And by the time it's done, it's about 200 miles to the north and about 200 miles up. Now the re-entry vehicle continues ballistic, and it goes about 600 miles up and increases in speed yet. So the only powered part of this launch, the only aiming part of this launch, is in the 5.5 minutes of the powered flight. After that, it's all ballistic. No different than throwing a football. You throw a football, as soon as it's released out of your hand, all the aiming is in your throat, all the power's in your throat. Same thing with ballistic missiles. And to put that warhead back down, that close, with all those things that Mike was talking about, the Earth turning under you, going up, top speed's about 16,800 miles per hour. It's coming back down into the Earth's atmosphere, slowing back down to subsonic speeds. All that is calculated out in that little 4,000K computer. It's amazing technology.
Was the warhead
A port cake.
was the warhead perpetually armed, or was it armed?
It was armed during the firing process. It was not armed. It had different arming stages that go through, like velocity, altitude, decrease in speed. So it went through a cycle of arming. That's why when the missile blew up in Damascus, through that big accident they have in there, and you can read about it up there in the museum. That's why the warhead did not explode. It did. Little rock wouldn't be here today. Yeah.
And there was no way to disarm it once it was launched.
Once it was launched, there's no way to stop it. You know, if there was, now in the 33 test rockets that we had, of which we launched 32 of them, they did have destructive mechanisms on them, because a lot of those early rockets in the testing stage, in the development stage, didn't make it. So when they were firing out at Cape Canaveral, we wanted to destroy it so it didn't come down in big chunks. It came down in smaller chunks. That's the only destructive system that was put on a missile, and that was the R&D missile. Once it went operational, there's no way to destroy it once it left the silo. The only thing that would stop it would be a mechanical issue that the missile had itself, which could happen.
But why'd they only build 54 of these as opposed to over 1,000 Minutemen?
Well, bear in mind that the Minuteman missile, it went through generations, Minuteman 1, 2, and 3. Was a solid fuel missile. Didn't quite have the distance. It didn't have the lift capacity. The warhead was much, much smaller.
1 to 1.3, yeah.
Yeah, so you needed more of those missiles. This was the big warhead. This was 9 megaton. The thought was you didn't need as many. This was the destructive thing. This is going to get your big command and control posts, your real hard sites, big cities and things like that. So the planners felt they only needed 53. The Russians had their comparable missile. They had 66 of them. But their missiles were bigger.
Much bigger.
Much bigger.
Much bigger.
And their warheads were 20 to 24 megaton. Ours was only 9. But they never developed the accuracy. We developed the accuracy, which made this a much more potent system.
Did you ever invite the Russians to one of these?
Actually, they have been here. They still have the right to inspect this. You know, we had to do the government had to do certain things for this not to count as an official launch site. So when you go on the observation platform and you go on this side, you'll see in the re-entry vehicle there's a great big